PatientCareFoundation.org. Go to our site and please make a generous tax-deductible donation and join the fight today. Thank you.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Oh, my goodness. Sometimes you get the bear, and sometimes the bear gets you, and the bear got me this morning. But we got a great show for you, and I wanted someone that's an expert, but I settled for Victor. No, I'm just teasing. No. I'm pleased to have Mr. Armendariz in there. Is that pretty good?
That is pretty awesome. I had some people that have been trying ever since I started doing that to roll their R. So you got it down, David.
That's a Texas roll, I might add.
It's probably why you can do that. The Texas roots.
Yeah, I had many friends that were, what they call brown or something. I don't know. That's all bull. You know, speaking of Mexicans, I used to eat lunch every day for 2 summers. I ate with a group of Mexicans because I worked for my uncle in pipeline construction company that had been my grandfather's, and I ate with them every day. And they would kid me about being white because, what are you? We know what we are. We're part Spanish, part this, part that. But what are you? And English and French, maybe. You know, I mean, so, you know, they have a heritage, and I didn't really, you know. But anyway, Victor, thank you for coming in today.
Oh, absolutely. And but now we have all the DNA testers, so everybody can find out what they are.
Oh, yeah. Like Trump said last night, he was more
Indian than Pocahontas.
You know, I thought, did you listen to all of his speech?
I did. I didn't hear all of it, but I heard most of it.
Yeah, and that's sort of the way I was. I got in from church late and listened to the rest of it. And, you know, it's like Brett and I were talking a minute ago. They can knock and throw rocks, do whatever they want to Trump. And you know, there were 3 places that I did not like what he said at all. And I don't like anybody taking my God's name in vain. And
I caught that. I didn't like that either.
I thought that was pretty tasteless. But anyway, beyond that, it's hard to knock success.
Right.
And the demos and what I wanted to talk about today was, after listening to your squad. They're not a squad. A squad is something totally different from what those 4 bozos are. But anyway, in my opinion, and I guess it was Presley. You correct me if I'm wrong.
She's the one from Massachusetts.
Okay, I think it was her, but it may. I know Omar concurred, or Omar has said her fair share about the fact that you know, I think they even put a date on it. By 2026, they wanted the United States to be Muslim, and you know, as far as my old history book goes, and as far as my old Texas Tech goes, you know, my history class, I believe that said that's treason. And then I looked that up, because I do make a few hundred mistakes a day or a minute or whatever.
At least a day.
At least a day. So I looked that up, and, you know, I was really, you know, sedition I had heard and knew sort of, but I really wasn't that familiar with the word sedition. And I looked it up, and boy, that is hanging around Omar and Presley and Cortez and whatever the other ones.
Talib.
That's hanging around their neck like crazy, and it's not, unfortunately, it's not punishable by death, but it is punishable by 20 years in prison.
Right.
And somebody, you know, as far as I'm concerned, when you say I'd like the country, and I'd like for everybody to rise up and have the country Muslim by 2026, or start today by not letting ICE do their job. Start today by, to me, that I always called it treason, but it is sedition. And I think they should be called to task, and I think it should start immediately.
Well, the biggest problem I have, if people really paid attention and listened to what the Omars and even some of the other, Omar's real close with the organization called CARE, which is supposedly a pro America Freedom Islamic association. But if you really pay attention to what CARE is doing, they're kind of a radical Islamic beliefs. They hide it well, but if you really listen to what they say, they've talked about Sharia law and bringing that to the United States. And then you've got Omar and Presley and Tlaib that make these comments. It's no secret. I think if anybody would sit down with them, any journalist worth a sack of salt or worth what they think they're worth would just sit down and have a conversation with them and ask them if you could turn the United States into a theology tomorrow, what would it be? And I promise you, it's not going to be Christian. It's not going to be Catholic. It's not going to be, and that's what I think people need to understand, because a lot of people here, when we bring these things up, because we actually do pay attention to what they say, they accuse us of using hyperbole. They accuse us of using crazy theories or conspiracy theories when it's really not. I mean, the sad thing is that some of this does sound like it's hyperbolic. But it's not, because of how outrageous some of the things are that they're saying, that's not being reported. And so what bothers me the most, at least in recent weeks, is the fact that Omar, Cortez, Tlaib, and Presley, and Pelosi, and the regular today's Democrats are actually out there trying to stop ISIS and Border Patrol from doing their constitutional law-abiding duty. That, to me, David, is exactly what you're talking about with the sedition and even borderline treason. I mean, I hate throwing the treason word around, but when you have sitting elected congresswomen and congressmen who are elected to represent the people, and we have a constitution and we have immigration law, which gives the Border Patrol what they're supposed to do, but you have these sitting congressmen aiding and abetting the people who broke the law and then trying to tie the hands of the ICE and look what happened, David, the other day with the anti-Tifa or so-called anti-fascist guy who firebombed the ICE detention center, and he supposedly he was a trained anti-Tifa gunman, but he didn't do too well against the Border Patrol because they took him out.
That's good. Glad they did, and this is. They're taking the First Amendment right and twisting it every way but Sunday. And it's sort of like, I know you are too, we're both big believers in the Second Amendment.
Absolutely.
The right to bear arms. However, that doesn't mean just because we have weapons that we're going to go out and shoot somebody and that's okay. So,
right.
I mean, you got to, they don't wash it the same way. And I wish some... If there were a Republican with gonads, it would be nice for them to stand up and say, these ladies, and I'm using that term very loosely, but these ladies are committing sedition or whatever. They're seditious or whatever. I don't care, but we got to get rid of them. And and the unfortunate thing is the people that are listening to them. They're being sold a bill of goods. It's the young folks, the millennials, and others,
and the radicals, domestic, Antifa. What I think is rapidly becoming a domestic terrorist organization that the media is trying to cover for. But you bring a good point, David, a very good point. There are people listening, and look how many times the people like Omar and Presley and Tlaib and people Pelosi, Schumer, are constantly accusing the conservative viewpoint as inciting riots or you're making look how many times they say, oh, Trump is making people go crazy. Well, there's no evidence of that, but there is evidence. The guy who firebombed the ICE detention center and was going to try to kill people, he left a note behind, and that note specifically, it had almost word for word some of the things that Cortez was saying about concentration camps. That's why he did it. You had a guy not too long ago that went in, that bought a bunch of Chick-fil-A sandwiches and went in and was trying to mass kill. And when he killed people, he was stuffing Chick-fil-A. He wanted to stuff a Chick-fil-A sandwich in their mouth. I bet you haven't heard about this. This is another story the media buried. This guy was also stopped, luckily, before he was able to do the mass shooting that he had planned. But he left behind a note, and his plan was, I'm going to go in, I'm going to shoot as many people, and when I kill them, I'm going to put a Chick-fil-A sandwich in their mouth. He was doing this because of what he had heard from the Democrats about Chick-fil-A being anti-gay and anti-homosexual and anti-whatever. And, this is the kind of stuff. And folks, I'm not making this up. You can go look it up. Just go look up gunman and Chick-fil-A, and you'll find it. But this is the kind of stuff. So we have evidence. Remember a couple of years ago when the shooter, the Bernie Sanders supporter, went to the Republican softball, the field where they were practicing. And he shot Steve Scalise and tried to shoot some others.
He got some others.
And
wounded anyway.
Wounded, and he did that because of what he was hearing from Bernie Sanders and the left. So it's happening. Just what you said, that people are listening to these people, and unfortunately they're taking it to a horrible level. And again, we do have the First Amendment, but we do need to hold people accountable for when they're out there trying to commit these atrocities and the people they're saying they're getting it from.
And the left wing is holding Trump accountable for things he doesn't even say.
For things that he doesn't even say.
It's just, and I've said this many times, and many times on the air as well, and we do such a variety of shows here. And as you know, we are the largest, or one of the largest, producing podcast radio stations in the country. And people may, what does that mean? Well, we produce our own shows. We're not getting them sent in.
Right.
Poor Victor's sitting across from an old man, and I'm sitting across from somebody that's lost his razor. But other than that, it's just no. So we produce our own thing, and we're responsible for it. And this is the thing that really bothers me the most. And I can paint it with a solid brush across almost every show that we do, that we are the luckiest nation in the world. We're the luckiest time of any society ever. And we have, let's see, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 computers sitting in this one room. And we have access, as you're over there playing Monopoly or so, I don't know what you're playing. Oh, and your telephone. Oh,
I'm answering listener questions.
Oh, but anyway, we have all of this power of information, and we as a public are too damn lazy to use it and find out the truth. And that scares me more than anything in the world, is that you don't have to believe. I wouldn't believe Victor if you saw what he looked.
I wouldn't either.
I wouldn't believe that boy. But anyway, no, just check him out. He says something, check it out, and you'll find that it's the truth. And this is where, I get really upset with the general public, is they won't take the time to find out, what a PCP is. What emergency room doctors do, how insurance companies and hospitals, particularly hospitals, are not our friends anymore. They may be a place you have to go, but they're certainly not our friends. And check out CON, Certificate of Need, as long as I'm on my soapbox and you all want to find out something. And it's also, and this is another scary thing, it's also part of the squad's plan and they have a plan. And this is something I kept listening to her, and you look at all 4 of them, and I can't say that any of them are shining stars exactly, or the brightest bulb in the box, but somebody's feeding them the stuff that they're feeding them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're just spewing out whatever they've been told to say. That's my opinion.
You know, you stumbled on something that another thing the media won't report. You're 100% right. There is the chief of staff for Alexandria Cortez is a trust fund kid. I can't remember. I believe he's Middle Eastern. I'm not exactly sure, but I know his parents are very, very well off, and they're funding him, and he's funding the squad. If somebody would do a little investigation, just a little poking around, you're going to see that the guy who's leading that group is this guy, and I cannot remember his name right now, but he's the chief of staff for Alexandria Cortez, and he is really running the show. He even had a spat going back and forth with Pelosi, and Pelosi made a comment, "I don't deal with staff." And so there's a big feud going on.
Whoa!
Oh, yeah.
And I let you in this room?
And that's exactly right, because, I talk about on my show a lot about elitism and how today's left, and not just the establishment Democrats, but all of Washington, the establishment Republicans, but mostly you see it with the Democrats, that feeling of elitism. They feel like they're elite. Well, now you've got this guy that is the chief of staff for her, and he's not only funding, he's running the show.
If we had a good IT person listening to the show, maybe he could look up Cortez's chief of staff. And with that being said, we're going to do a little something different today. And what we're going to do is, these opinions that you're hearing are those of Mr. Armendariz and myself. How do you roll Moxley?
Oh, you know what? That's going to be a tough one.
That's a tough one.
But
anyway, I have been rolled. No, anyway, we're going to do something different, and that is that I don't want to involve any of our sponsors with our opinions particularly. Mm-hmm. And I know some of them certainly agree with what we're saying, but, to protect the innocent, I'm just going to run ads about the shows that we do here, and hope folks will listen in and tune in to other folks' shows that will not take on politics like we do. But I just felt after I saw Omar that I couldn't sit still. I couldn't keep quiet. That this is just, what she's saying. And I think of my father, your father, but the veterans of World War II, that if they heard something like this, they would be up in arms. We'll be back right after this.
Whether cruising the strip in a 57 Chevy or taking the family on a vacation in a 71 Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser, you need to tune in to Classic Cars with Steve Ronaldo and Jim Weber every Saturday from 8 to 9 a.m. on americaswebradio.com.
This is Ron Camacho, host of the Business Hour, on Fridays from 10 to 11 a.m. Join me as I talk with passionate professionals on a program that profiles the best businesses, business practices, and fascinating business professionals to get an insider view of how America works.
Hello, I'm Dr. Mike Karuchak. Have you ever wondered what doctors talk about amongst themselves? If you do, join us on the Doctor's Lounge and hear the doctors' conversations amongst themselves. Join me and my co-host, Dr. Hal Schertz, every Thursday morning, 8 to 9 a.m.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
And we do thank you for listening and making America's Web Radio #1 in the producing of podcast shows in the United States. That's great. And we don't want to tout it, but why not tout it?
Sure we do. I'll do it. I'll do it for you.
Oh, okay. Anyway, did you get the guy's name?
Yeah, so I'm going to give this a shot. So her chief of staff's name is Saikat Chakrabarti. And he is the chief of staff to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We can roll her R's, I guess. Although apparently they get offended when you roll the R's in the pronunciation. Yeah, this must be something. You just can't make a Democrat happy.
That's
you just
true.
can't. You just can't.
That's very true.
But he is her
I wonder
chief.
if silver bullets would work.
We're not advocating that.
No.
We're just wondering.
Just wondering. I mean, if
But he was
I
born
hold silver away.
he was born and raised in Bengali, and I guess he grew up in Fort Worth, Texas. Well, doesn't that just make you pissed? How could this kid be a product of Texas? Man. But of course, he's an academic. He went to Harvard University, and he has a degree in computer science. Apparently, he did work on Wall Street for a little while, 8 years in Silicon Valley, so we know where he got his politics. Did a little bit of web design and coming up with some web design startups, and now he is a chief of staff for Alexandria Cortez. So,
and I bet he doesn't make any. He's probably just giving his time free and doesn't believe in capitalism and making a salary.
Well, apparently he was the author of the Green New Deal, and he also slipped up. He may not have slipped up. He may have done this on purpose, but the media slipped up by letting this out, or somebody leaked it. But he said that the Green New Deal had nothing to do with it, and it had nothing to do with climate change. It was to slow down the United States economy and put the big brakes on it, because in his view, and this is what people need to understand, David. This is what drives me nuts, is people don't understand that the entire left right now, whether it's Biden or Pelosi or Schumer, or whether you're talking about Pocahontas or the fake Hispanic O'Rourke, they're all for, and especially Sanders, they're all for putting a dent in the United. They don't think the United States should stand above all. They think the United States needs to be knocked down a few steps, and the Green New Deal would the devastation that would do to our economy would just be, I mean, it's hard to put it in words. And they openly are seeking to do this, and what leaked out was the fact that this guy admitted that the Green New Deal had nothing to do with climate change. Their goal was to slow down the U.S. economy and transform it into a more European socialist model.
You know, over and over and over again, who the hell is going to pay for this? It can't be done. And I would like everybody, dadgummit, I forgot to start the show with this, and that is, get a pen and paper and write down some of this stuff. Write down the term or the word utopian and check out what government, what society, what any country, anything has ever had a successful utopian society. It ain't gonna happen. Victor ain't gonna do the work. I'm gonna have to do my share and his share, and that ain't fair.
Well,
but,
you know that's another good point. If anybody out there, here's another thing to write down. Write down Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah.
You know, Atlas Shrugged is an amazing book by Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand. You don't have to read it because it is a tough book to read, but there's a movie now. There's some really good guys that got together, and it is a 3-part series movie called Atlas Shrugged, based on the book. I highly encourage, if you're a listener out there, write it, Atlas Shrugged, go get the DVD and watch it, because you will begin to get an understanding of exactly what David was just talking about, because it's unaffordable what they're talking about. This utopian society they dream of, the socialism, somebody has to pay for it. And when you tax a nation too much, when you punish producers, there will be a point where the producers will get they'll take their ball and they're going to leave. And then you have no more producers.
Well, what was it that Margaret Thatcher said, her famous quote?
Socialism is great until you run out of other people's money.
Yeah.
And
I think that is it's such a beautiful quote, and so true.
Very true.
I'm just a poor boy from Texas that graduated from Texas Tech, and I don't understand what one doesn't understand about socialism, and that we can't afford it. We can't afford to pay everybody's doctor bill. Think
about when you were growing up, in your generation, and even in my generation, and the biggest thing that I like to point out, the way I was brought up, I didn't have a father that was born in the United States. I didn't have a father that was born with the pride of a country that was based in freedom and liberty, a country that was based in, if you put the sweat equity forward, you will gain the rewards, and you will have rewards for that. But yet he instilled in me what I'm sure was instilled in you, and I know was instilled in your generation, David, is where if no matter who you are in this country, no matter what color you are, if you've got the work ethic, you can be successful. And if you were born into poverty in this country, it doesn't mean that you stay in poverty. We've lifted the capitalistic United States freedom model has lifted more people out of poverty than any nation in the world, and there's a reason for that. It's because of capitalism. But the days of when you grew up, David, being told that if you want something, you got to work for it. When I was growing up, constantly my dad said, "You're lucky to be born in this nation, United States." And he said, "I'm here and I'm working forward to get my citizenship of this great country because of what it afforded me. And you were born here, so you have no excuses." He used to tell us that, me, my brothers, and my sisters. Where is that today? Because the millennials and the kids today, the Generation Z or whatever they're called, they're being told, if you got a problem, the government's going to fix it. Go to the government.
Or go to mommy and daddy.
Or go to mommy and daddy and live in their basement. And
Yeah. The other thing, and again, I've said it many times, and want to make sure that everybody knows how we feel about veterans. And if you're a veteran and you started a business, and in the last year, we will give you 2 weeks of free advertising about your business. And I want to go further, and I've said this on a number of shows too, and I listen to these ladies saying what they're saying, and then I think of my father, that in 1941, my older sister was a baby, and these folks from the other side of the Pacific decided they were going to bomb Hawaii. And they did. And my dad had a successful business going. He had a lumber yard in Brownfield, Texas, Terry County Lumber Yard, as a matter of fact. And he sold it for nothing and became an officer in the Navy. And, I've thought of that a bajillion times in my life. That would I do that? Would I sell this? Oh, yeah. You want to buy it? No. No, I mean, it was that kind of pride in his country. And it wasn't just my father. It was it was every place. And I thought that we were going to have the healing and the coming together after the bombing in New York and the towers. But we got some of it, but not all of it. And I salute, I salute the folks that gave up their careers and went and joined the Navy or Army or whatever they joined and went to fight. But, it just, I love our country, and I love our veterans. I can literally say I love one serviceman for sure, and that's my son that's as an officer in the Air Force. And I salute him, and I salute everybody that's in the military. And if you don't, and you don't honor our flag, and you don't respect the position, then I totally agree with Trump. Get the hell out of my country.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I too will happily sit here and say, if you don't like it, get out. If you don't like it, Delta's ready when you are. And I'm not afraid to say it, and you can call me a racist or any other name. They can call me what they want. But David, I bet you remember, we used to have bumper stickers everywhere that said, America, love it or leave it, or love her or leave her. We had those bumper stickers, and not once was that called racist. In fact, it was a very prideful thing to put that on. That might have been the first sticker. It was either that or, oh my gosh, in New Hampshire, I can't remember their state motto. But it was either that sticker or the America, love it or leave it, might have been the first sticker I ever put on a bumper for my car. Live free or die. Live free or die. Is that racist too? I mean, should we check with New Hampshire to see if that's right? The next thing they're going to do is say the "Don't Tread on Me" flag is somehow racist.
Yeah. Well, Brett and I were talking earlier that there's not a damn thing racist about what Trump said.
No, there's not. There's
Not a thing. He didn't say, all blacks get out of the country.
Nope.
No, he didn't even
in fact, David, he never mentioned a name. He didn't say congressman or congresswoman. He didn't even say Congress. He didn't say, no, I'm sorry. He said congresswoman. It may say congressman. I think I have to go back and look at it, but he never said a name. He didn't call anyone out. They themselves ran to the microphone. So what do they think of themselves if they're going to call him a racist and he didn't mention a name, but yet they were so happy to run to the mic and say, "Oh, me, he's talking about me."
Yeah.
So how can you have it both ways? You want to call him a racist and every name in the book, but he didn't point you out. He didn't name you. But you're running to the mic going, me, he's talking about me. That racist over there is talking about me. So what kind of view do you have on yourself if you're going to do that? And that's what those four did. And it's amazing. And not, a day or two before, Pelosi said Trump's wasn't making America great again, that he wanted to make America white again. Trump didn't say that. Pelosi said that.
That's right.
And so when you really look at who points out color all the time, the left.
The left, no question. We're going to take a short break, just advertise some of our other shows, and we'll be back with you right after this on David's Pick on America's Web Radio.
This is Ron Camacho, host of the Business Hour, on Fridays from 10 to 11 a.m. Join me as I talk with passionate professionals on a program that profiles the best businesses, business professionals, business practices, and fascinating individuals to get an insider view of how America works. 10 to 11 a.m. on America's Web Radio.
Whether cruising the strip in a 57 Chevy or taking the family on a vacation in a 71 Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser, you need to tune in to Classic Cars with Steve Ronaldo and Jim Weber every Saturday from 8 to 9 a.m. on americaswebradio.com.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the americasbroadcastnetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
And you're back on David's Pick on America's Web Radio, and I unfortunately can't be like my co-host today and have my own music. I just have to. We just have to come in a la carte, you know.
We might have to find you some.
We might have to find me some. That's right.
You know, I was a member for a
I
while.
might get fired though with some of the comments I make. You know, you never know.
Well, you know,
my job may be on the line.
On the line. I don't know. Yes, you know, sometimes passion takes over, and people need to understand that people from let's just say people from different generations, and that passion stirs, and you know, some things come out. It doesn't mean you're an awful person or anything like that. I mean, come on, look at some of the things that Talib and Omar saying, and they get away. Omar, David, basically blamed the United States for terrorism. Yeah. You know, there was an attack in Kenya a few years ago. I don't know if you remember, where some radicals went into a mall and just started shooting shoppers.
I do.
And after that happened, Omar sat down with I think it was Al Jazeera, and the guy was saying, well, isn't this the fault of the U.S.? And I'm paraphrasing, but you can look it up for yourself. As David said, you should always look up what we say and what anybody else says and do your own research. But if you look that up, you'll find that she was on, I believe it was Al Jazeera, and the guy said, isn't it the fault of the United States? And Omar 100% agreed with him. And yet, she can get away with saying these things. And again, in the United States, we have the First Amendment. She can say what she wants, but there are also consequences. And she faced no consequences for that, when if we slip up in the moment of passion or anything, they'll come after us with everything they got.
Well, I'd like Hillary to look up Benghazi and see whose fault it was.
Man. Boy, I've said a few things about Benghazi that they probably would come after me for, but she deserves every word I've ever said about that.
That's true. Good old Hillary. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and the looking up part, that I really would like people to do, and just it doesn't take that long. In fact, I was looking up sedation today and treason and so forth, and it really, you can get an education on your telephone, which I find at my age I find amazing. But we didn't have anything like that where I grew up, but or when I grew up. We barely had them telephones back then. Get off my party line. No.
Get off my party line.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't that funny.
You may have to explain what that means to some of the listeners out there who are too young to know.
Well, that means that you shared the telephone with your neighbor down the road. And I know one old bag could really talk for hours. And finally, I would have to say something. I need to make a call, Ms. So-and-so.
It was almost like waiting on a phone booth.
Oh, it was, yeah. Mm-hmm. In your kitchen or wherever your phone happened to be hanging. But that was interesting times.
I bet it was.
And I might add, we thought we were very blessed to have phones.
To have a phone.
A phone, whether it was on a party line or not. Just having a phone was, man, a technical step forward. Mm-hmm. And you realize what today is. We're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the moon
going
landing.
To the moon.
And, I remember that very well. And it's just being older than dirt, or being that Moses was a good friend, makes you where you can remember that kind of stuff. And I remember it well. And
how old were you, David, when we went and landed on the moon?
I would have been in my early 20s.
Wow,
very early 20s.
So you probably have vivid memories of NASA talking about this incredible computer system that they had, because what people need to understand is, David, there wasn't a cell phone in your hand. There wasn't a laptop in your lap. There wasn't a desktop on your desk. We really were, as consumers, watching NASA use this incredible computing device that they and the military had been developing, that really consumers hadn't really had a chance to really dive into. And so what was it like being in your 20s and watching, for lack of a better term, a rocket ship go to the moon?
Well, and I have to give Walt Disney credit for his initiatives in many things. We went to, in 1957, my dad was a wonderful man, and we always, and I since I've been married a couple of times and do what I do, I've never done this, and it was my dad's philosophy that we all need a vacation, and we'd take off anywhere from a minimum of 2 weeks to 6 weeks.
Wow.
And we would have some incredible vacations, and one of them was going in 1957, was going to Disneyland, not Disney World, but Disneyland in California. Mm-hmm. And this is what the future is going to look like.
Yeah, that's
and it was a telephone that with a picture.
Wow.
Son of a gun. And, Disneyland was just absolutely, dreams come true, or couldn't believe or whatever. I remember, and we had a course in my we had junior high. We didn't have middle school. We had junior high. It was 7th, 8th, and 9th. And the world would stop, and we'd get to watch TV in our social studies class when the first space orbit, the first launch that just went up and came down. And we were watching all of that, and Kennedy making his statement, we will go to the moon by the end of the decade. And, and it's like like Trump right now says we're going to Mars. Mm-hmm. And I saw the administrator. I think one of the worst things, and I guess was it Obama that closed down NASA?
He really restricted. Well, this is another thing that you guys, the listeners out there, are probably going to go, Victor, you're making this up, but I'm not, and you can go look it up. But Obama, I don't remember if he was successful, but I know at one point he tried to change the mission of NASA to be work on relationships with Muslims. I kid you not. And look, I'm not saying it's a bad thing that we do whatever we can, here in this country.
You know what the towelheads can do, in my opinion?
I knew you. I had a feeling you were going to say that. No, but David, what's awesome is you can take whatever religion you want and live happily in this country and be successful. So I'm not saying there's something wrong with these kind of initiatives for people to get along or whatever they wanted to call it, but you don't take NASA and make their new job to work on Muslim relations or Catholic relations or any other. NASA's NASA. We pave the way for, or at least we should be paving the way for discoveries and things like that. So, but yeah, that when you said that, it reminded me, and people can look it up. Obama did try to do that. So he did pull funding for NASA. I know it upset me and a lot of my friends, because we actually believe in space exploration, and that's what NASA's for.
If you want to see a world scared to death, it was called a little thing that went beep, 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 and it was called Sputnik.
Oh, yep.
Now, I remember Sputnik, and I remember radio stations playing beep, 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 and it lit a fire under our tails. And again, this was back in 56 or 57, I believe. It lit a fire, and I've been very fortunate. I've been to California, gone through all of the space stuff in California and some in Houston. And, I cringe. I'm sitting here shaking, thinking of what that stupid Omar and those other stupid bitches
Omar
have
Presley.
said.
Omar Presley.
We
Talib.
are the greatest country in the world. So certainly we have faults.
Of course.
I love you like a brother, Victor, but you do have a few faults that I'd like to, No, I'm just kidding.
I've got more than a few.
We are a country, and yes, we're not perfect.
Right.
But no other country is as close to perfect as we are.
As we are.
And we have come together, stuck together. What we did in World War II, what we've done in what we did in World War I. And we are the greatest country in the world. And I love Trump for having the guts to say it. And stand up and say, I have made America great again. And he has.
He really has.
And we've got countries that had no respect for us. When we did the Carter Desert Classic. And that was due to one thing. And it was very easy to see, that one thing being that we had cut the military back to nothing, and it couldn't operate. It couldn't have been successful. It didn't even have the equipment to be successful. But we got it now.
Oh, yeah.
And, last night as I was listening to Trump, and I'm not I am a Trump supporter, come to think of it, but, I'm like everybody else. Some things he does irritates me. He did a couple of things last night that really irritated me. But all in all, he has done what he said he was going to do and done it very successfully. And I guess I kept thinking about, I honestly believe we'll have 4 more years with Trump. I hope.
I hope.
But the other side of it is, in 4 years, where do we go? And we've seen that the Democrats can take gold and turn it into garbage in less than a year. And, they cut back on the natural resources. They cut back on this, that, and the other. And we can be back in with our hands up, waving the white flag, not the American flag, in a heartbeat.
That's true. I will tell you, David, if I can entertain the audience here for a second, exactly.
You're not going to sing, are you?
No, I'm not.
Oh.
Where I would love to see the next 4 years go, because I like you, I believe Trump. I'm one of the ones saying right now, of course, events could happen, events could change, But if things continue the way they're going, I do believe Donald J. Trump will win a second term, and he'll win bigger than he did the first time. And when he does win, my hope, my dream, my wish is that he completely takes the gloves off. He will not have to worry about re-election. He will have 4 years, and hopefully, one thing, David, that we can be thankful for, I think, is Omar, Presley, Tlaib, Cortez. They are the gift that keeps on giving right now, because they are putting a big wedge in the Democrat Party, and Trump was a genius last week with his tweet that is making the Democrat establishment come to the rescue of Omar and this radical left. And the Omars and the Cortezes, they are shaping the direction of the Democrat Party, and now the Democrat Party has to unite together to to come to their defense and really show the American people who's running that party. And now Donald Trump can run against that. It doesn't matter if it's Biden or Pocahontas or the fake Hispanic O'Rourke, whoever the nominee is. Trump's going to be able to run against radical leftist socialist policies. And so when he wins, which I think he will, I think he'll win the House back. I think we will. I think Republicans are going to ride the tail once again of Trump, and they're going to come back into the House and maybe more seats in the Senate. This is what Trump, I hope, takes the gloves off for the next 4 years and says, okay, we have to do these things so that if someday when a Democrat gets reelected, they can't dismantle everything, like you said, David, in a year or so. So what I think needs to happen, one of the first things, we need to abolish the IRS. We need to get rid of the current tax system and change over to a consumption tax system. Get rid of the Department of Education. That needs to be shut down. The EPA needs to be, if not shut down, really, really reined in. I could probably go off several departments that we could start to dismantle and get rid of. Imagine, David, what course that would set us on.
But not the defense.
Not the defense.
Let me ask you something, Victor. Could you use $1,000?
Absolutely.
Okay, I got $1,000 right here. If you can tell me one business or one organization that more fits their logo than the Democrats.
No, I don't think I can. And I would love to take that $1,000 off your hands. No, they fit that. And what you're alluding to, I believe, is the
jackass.
The jackass. They earn that every day.
All of them.
And all of them.
They got a big herd of them.
Think about it. We were talking about what you remembered about growing up with Kennedy and the space program, and how Sputnik lit a fire under us. And Kennedy was a Democrat president who believed in a strong military, believed in lower taxes, believed in a smaller, not as small as we like, but he did believe in a little bit of a smaller government. My gosh, it was Kennedy, the Democrat, who said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country.
Amen.
That was a Democrat. David, do you think Kennedy could be a Democrat in today's Democrat Party?
No.
I mean, there's not a chance.
And, the sad part about what you're saying is that a fellow Texan took over after Kennedy was assassinated.
Lyndon B. Johnson.
And he started all the problems today.
Yes, he did.
And that we've had for years and years, since 1963. Mm-hmm. And that's a long time. And I apologetic, and if anybody ever wonders, J. Everett Haley wrote a book called A Texan Looks at London, and it's one of the best books you could hope to find somewhere. A Texan Looks at London. J. Everett Haley, and he was a friend of my uncle's, and he laid it on the line what LBJ and Lady Bird were, and it wasn't nice. And they got rich off of Vietnam, Lady Bird particularly. So I know people don't like to hear that, but that's the truth. And again, look it up.
David, that's another, look it up, because there are a lot of things that today's, let's call them millennials, Democrats, socialists, even especially Cortez, Omar, Pelosi, Schumer. There's a lot of things that either they don't know or they don't want to tell you. They don't want people to learn today, which is why I'm so against the Department of Education. And the federal government should never, especially in a free country, shouldn't have anything to do with educating kids, because they're indoctrination centers. They're not education centers.
And one of the prime things that started in actually it was in the 60s, but and this all, and people don't even, you say the word communist. In the 1960s or even the early 50s, you say the word communist, and it was Russia. It was this group of people that were believed in the government doing everything for you. You had no right. You had no say. And listen, folks, we're in a Cold War right now. Whether you want to believe it or not, we are in a Cold War, as scary as, in fact, more scary than the missile Cold War. This one is an educational Cold War, and they're doing exactly what I was preached to about back in the late 50s, early 60s, that the communists don't want to destroy their potential country.
Exactly.
They want to keep it intact. They're not going to bomb us. They're going to book us. And when I say book us, it's called rewriting history.
You are so right, David. It's funny because you're once again hitting on something that people really need to pay attention to, because you're right. It's if you look at government education, which is people call public schools, I call government education, and I'm not including the Department of Defense in this, because if you're an Army brat and you're running around, you're actually getting probably a pretty good education on an Army base or military base. But other than that, when you're out in the neighborhoods and you go to public schools, they are government schools. And David, you're absolutely right. The Russians or China, they are not going to take the United States over by trying to bomb us. They know they can't do that. They're not going to win that war. But what they are going to try to do is take from within. Here's another point that the media wouldn't talk about that you can go look up. Go look up President Obama's past before he became president. Go look up and do some research on some of the things that Obama was saying when he was in college. Go look up the fact that when Obama launched his political career, he did it from the living room of a known domestic terrorist called Bill Ayers. Go look up some information on Bill Ayers. These people talked about and they taught Obama. Obama was kind of a radical back in his college years. And somebody sat him down and said, you can't rush the United States in the terms of a revolution and think you're going to change it. But what you can do is go within, go through the educational system, become an academic, get elected, and start changing the country from within. If you can get to Washington and convince enough people to follow you, you can start changing. And folks, if you listen to Obama's speech when he was inaugurated, and he said, we will fundamentally change the United States. What do you think, David, he was talking about? If we have a great country and you just got elected president and you said you wanted to fundamentally change, well, I know this country to be one based on freedom, liberty, independence. So if you're telling me you want to fundamentally change it, then you must be wanting to change from independence, liberty, and freedom. So you're absolutely right. These are the things that won't be taught in schools, and they do revisionist history, and that's the scary thing. Because, David, they're not learning about Lyndon B. Johnson. They're not learning about Woodrow Wilson. Yesterday some academic historian said that Donald Trump will go down as the most racist president. Do they not know about Woodrow Wilson, who single-handedly brought back the KKK or brought the KKK to light? And ladies and gentlemen, Woodrow Wilson was a Democrat. Do they not know about Roosevelt, who actually took Japanese citizens and put them in an internment camp on United States soil? Folks, that was a Democrat. Andrew Jackson, who led the Trail of Tears, that was a Democrat. What? This is the things, David, like you said, they're not teaching because they're changing history.
Folks, look it up. And when you hear something that you say, gosh, I can't believe that, or I wonder about that, look it up. And it's not me, Maybe a little bit you, Victor, but not me, because I'm too old. It's not gonna. It's not gonna affect me many more years. But it is going to affect my sons, and it's going to affect their sons,
their kids,
and their kids.
Your legacy, David. Your legacy will be affected if we don't keep this ship going in the direction that Trump has taken us.
And unfortunately, a lot of folks, and millennials particularly, have no clue. And they have no clue about where they came from, the rights that they have because of others giving up their rights or going to war. And, war is terrible. Guns are terrible. We shouldn't have guns. You know, if the good guys don't have them, rest assured the bad guys will have them.
Well, David, that's another good point. Somebody in this world is going to be they're going to be the global leader. And you have to ask yourself, do you want it to be the United States or do you want it to be China? Do you want it to be Russia? I want it to be the known country that has a history of actually changing wrongs, making rights for a country who believes in independence. That's us. I want it to be the United States.
I just don't want it to be was us.
Exactly, and that's where we were going for 8 years, which is why I always say you don't have to like Trump. You don't have to love Trump. You don't have to love any politician, and you shouldn't love a lot of them, but you can look at policies, and you can see what works. And it doesn't take rocket science to look at 8 years of stagnant economic growth, and now we've had 2.5 years of unbelievable economic growth. Policy matters.
No question. Folks, this is sort of I tell you what, we might start doing this more often.
That sounds fun.
I enjoy being with you, Victor, and you're very good, and I hope that I haven't messed up your parade in any way. And I want to invite everybody to listen to On Point with Victor every Tuesday afternoon at 2 o'clock, followed by Locked and Loaded and Roger B. talking about weapons of all shapes, forms, and fashions.
That's right.
And I'd like for him to bring the law in here. Loaded.
Yeah, loaded.
with a rocket. And I could think of some places I would like to aim that sucker. But that was a fun weapon to fire. So was the M52 grenade launcher. I love that.
Oh, I bet. We might have to do a show one day, David, just you telling us some of the things that you got to fire back in your Army days.
Back in the old days. Well, it's fortunate that the world still is here.
Yeah.
Give me a rocket and I'll shoot that sucker. Which button? No. Anyway, it's been fun, and want to thank everybody for listening. We had a very good audience, and you got some comments, I think, while we were.
Yeah, that's what's great about what we're doing now. We do all these shows, whether it's On Point with Victor or Locked and Loaded with Roger B. or David's Fix, or David's Picks, whatever the show is. We do them live, being the number one, or if not number one, one of the largest live podcasting radio stations out there. This is national, and we broadcast on YouTube and Facebook, and it's great because we can get instant feedback. So we got a few people chiming in today, David. So that was really, really awesome, and I love it. I love it when people interact.
And we'll be back with more entertainment right after this.
My name is Kyle Hayes, a motorsports student at Alfred State College. Every year, Alfred State students compete in the Great Race, which is a cross-country time endurance rally for vintage vehicles. As you can imagine, it's pretty costly. I'm asking for your help. Your donation can make it possible for these students to live their passion and promote the vintage automobile industry. Please visit our site at give.alfredstate.edu and search Great Race to learn more and help us reach our goal. Thank you.
This is Ron Camacho, host of the Business Hour, on Fridays from 10 to 11 a.m. Join me as I talk with passionate professionals on a program that profiles the best businesses, business professionals,